The title of the story is The Baby on the Doorstep, a Life-Changing Discovery. Imagine waking up one morning to find a stranger's baby on your doorstep, accompanied by only a cryptic note and a desperate plea for aid. What would you do? This is the story of a woman whose life was turned upside down when fate struck. Sarah, a young woman from a calm suburban neighborhood, had an ordinary Monday morning. Her days normally began with the same pattern of brewing coffee, reading the newspaper, and planning her week. However, this morning was different. A knock on the door broke her serene moment. She wasn't expecting anyone, but the faint, tentative sound of the knock caught her interest. When she answered the door, there was no one there, just a basket carefully arranged on her porch. Inside, a baby was wrapped in a beautiful blanket, tiny, vulnerable, and defenseless. A message was nestled near her, but it included no actual clues, only a desperate plea. Please keep her safe. Sarah's hands trembled when she lifted the infant. The little one opened her deep, trusting eyes, as if looking for protection. Who left her? And why Sarah? Sarah sat in her dimly lit living room, staring at the spot where the baby had been only hours earlier. Sarah's arms still felt warm from her tiny body, and the gentle cries rang across her head. She had done the correct thing by phoning the police. It was their responsibility to find the baby's family. But why was she so restless? Are you feeling uneasy? She attempted to distract herself by making tea, turning on the television, and scrolling through her phone, but nothing helped. Every time she closed her eyes, she noticed the baby's deep, trusting look. It was as if those tiny eyes were begging with her, softly requesting something more. Sarah was unable to ignore the urge and decided to call the station. What will happen to her now? She inquired nervously. The officer's response was routine. She has been placed in a temporary foster care facility while we investigate. If we don't discover the parents, she will stay in the system. The words "remain in the system" sent shivers down Sarah's spine. That night, sleeping was impossible. The notion of the baby being alone and surrounded by strangers was heartbreaking. Sarah knew exactly what she needed to do by the morning. Her heart was beating as she drove to the foster center. When she saw the infant again, something within her clicked. When she scooped her up, the little one nestled up against her bosom, her tiny fingers wrapping around Sarah. It wasn't only about sympathy anymore. It was something deeper, something indestructible. Sarah whispered, "Your name is Lily," and in that instant, she realized that this was not the conclusion of their journey. This was just the beginning. Sarah couldn't shake the impression that Lily had entered her life for a reason. However, there were still many unsolved questions. Who left her? And why did they choose Sarah's doorstep? Days passed, and Sarah's bond with Lily grew stronger with each visit to the foster center. She cradled her, fed her, and made promises she wasn't sure she could make. She had never considered fostering or adoption before, but the thought of Lily growing up without a stable, loving family made her feel unbearably sad. Then one evening, her phone rang. It was the investigator assigned to the case. "We found something," he said. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "The note. It was written by a woman named Emily Carter," said the man. "She is the baby's mother. We traced her using her handwriting and some old records." Sarah's heart pounded. "Where is she?" "That's the complicated part," the detective sighed. "She's been living in concealment. Based on what we've learned, she was in an abusive relationship. She attempted to flee several times but was always forced back. We assume she left the baby on your doorstep as a final resort, hoping that someone like you might keep her safe." Sarah sat down, holding the phone tightly. This was not simply a case of neglect or abandonment. This was a frantic display of love, a mother's last attempt to save her child. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she finally spoke. "I need to find her." The detective paused. "It might not be easy. She's terrified and yet in danger." Sarah gulped hard. "I don't care," she replied forcefully. "I need to help her." Sarah could not quit thinking about Emily. The name now had a face in her mind. A young woman, alone and terrified, forced to make an unthinkable decision. How much anxiety and pain did she feel before leaving her baby behind? Sarah eventually found a lead through a local women's support group. Emily had been seen in a local shelter, but she was keeping to herself and refusing to speak to anyone. The shelter staff confirmed that she was in a vulnerable state, haunted, withdrawn, and always looking over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to bring her back into the life she had fled. Sarah hesitated before leaving. Will Emily even want to see her? What if she regretted leaving Lily and had nothing to do with her past? But Sarah felt she had to try. When she arrived at the shelter, the air was filled with calm whispers and the aroma of old coffee. Women sat in tiny groups, some with children and others staring blankly at the walls. And suddenly, in the distant corner, she noticed her. Emily was thinner than Sarah had imagined, with a pale face and black lines under her eyes. She gripped a cup of tea with shaky hands, deep in meditation. Sarah approached warily. Emily? The young woman flinched at the mention of her name. Her eyes darted up, terrified and hesitant. She recognized Sarah immediately. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Emily whispered, barely above a whisper, "Is she safe?" Sarah sat across from her and nodded. "She is safe. She is liked. But she needs you. And I think you need her too." Emily felt tears rise up in her eyes. "I didn't know what else to do." Sarah grabbed for her hand. "Then let's figure it out together." Emily focused on Sarah, her fingers clenching on the mug. She appeared to want to believe her words, but fear kept her back. Her lips trembled as she said, "I wanted to keep her. I actually did. But I knew that if I stayed, he would hurt her. Perhaps worse." Sarah listened, her heart tearing at Emily's anguish in voice. She could feel the weight of the past weighing down on her. Years of anxiety, control, and helplessness. Emily was not simply fleeing from a bad relationship. She was running for her life. "I thought leaving her was the only way to save her," Emily explained, wiping her eyes swiftly as if embarrassed. "I waited outside your home that night. I saw your lights turned on. I persuaded myself that if you lifted her up and held her for even a second, she would be secure." Sarah gulped hard. She had unintentionally participated in Emily's desperate scheme. And now, as much as she adored Lily, she realized the tiny girl wasn't simply hers to love. She belonged to Emily, too. "What do you want now?" Sarah inquired gently. Emily hesitated. "I don't know," she said. "I'm not even sure if I can be a mother anymore. I have nothing. No home. No employment. I have no idea how to be a parent." "You don't have to do it alone," Sarah stated firmly. "You made the most difficult decision a mother could make to safeguard her child. That tells me you're stronger than you realize." Emily let out a nervous breath. "But what if I fail?" Sarah stretched across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then we'll sort things out together. You don't have to fight this battle alone anymore." Emily appeared fearless for the first time. She seemed hopeful. The road to recovery was not simple. It never is. Emily was initially apprehensive. The prospect of regaining her life seems unattainable, like attempting to assemble the fragmented shards of a shattered mirror. She'd spent years believing she was powerless, caught in a cycle of fear and control. How could she just start over? How could she possibly be the mother that Lily needed? But Sarah would not let her give up. She accompanied Emily to her first therapy session, sitting in the waiting room and providing silent support. Emily was afraid at first and hesitant to open out, but gradually she began to speak up about the violence, the fear, the nights she spent awake, wondering whether she would ever leave. Each session chipped away at the barriers she had erected around herself. Sarah also assisted her in enrolling in a job training program at the women's shelter. Emily almost quit on the first day, afraid she wasn't clever enough or strong enough. But Sarah stayed by her, reminding her of the bravery it required to walk away and fight for her child's future. Emily gradually began to believe it, too. She discovered a tiny apartment through the shelter's housing program. It wasn't much, just a little one-bedroom with used furniture. But it was Emily's first truly personal space, a place where she was not under anyone's control. a space where she could finally breathe. The hardest part was seeing Lily again. Emily's hands trembled the day Sarah took her to the foster care center. She hadn't held her daughter since the night she left her at Sarah's door. What if Lily doesn't recognize her? What if she'd already forgotten her? But when Emily lifted her up, Lily cuddled against her chest, as if she had been waiting for her all along. Emily sobbed, hugging her tight, saying apologies and love, and for the first time in a long time, she felt hope, which she had thought she had lost forever. Sarah observed them with a full heart. She had battled for Lily when she didn't have anyone. But she didn't simply save Lily. She had also saved Emily. Emily persisted in her fight for several months. She landed a part-time work at a neighborhood bakery. She attended each therapy session, determined to be the mother Lily deserved. Throughout it all, Sarah stood by her side, not as a savior or replacement, but as a friend. When the time came for Emily to show the courts that she could care for Lily, she stood straighter and stronger. She was no longer the fearful, broken woman who had abandoned her baby. She was a mother who had struggled for her child, and for herself. Even though she was eager to take Lily home, one thing was clear. She and Sarah were no longer just two strangers brought together by fate. They were family, in a way neither of them had anticipated. The courtroom was quiet while the judge considered Emily's case. Sarah sat in the back, watching Emily hold her breath with quivering hands in her lap. Months of hard work, recovering, and proving herself had culminated in this moment. When the judge finally spoke, Emily gripped Sarah's hand so tightly that it hurt. Based on the progress you've made and the stable home environment you've built, I find you fit to regain custody of your daughter. Emily gasped, tears running down her cheeks. Sarah felt her eyes well up. She had never doubted Emily's power, but hearing it formally recognized made everything seem more real. Lily, too small to grasp the gravity of the situation, simply smiled in Emily's arms, tugging on her hair. Sarah felt a combination of feelings as they exited the courtroom: joy, relief, and something melancholy. She had cherished Lily as if she were her own. The thought of not waking up to her small hands reaching for her in the morning made her chest hurt. But this has always been the goal. This is what they fought for. Outside, Emily turned to Sarah, her face filled with anguish. "I wouldn't have made it without you," she confessed. "You saved me." Sarah shook her head and smiled through tears. "No, Emily, you've saved yourself. I only reminded you that you could." Emily hesitated before asking, "Will you still be in our lives?" Sarah didn't even have to think. Always. And in that moment, they recognized that family meant more than simply blood. It was about love, about the people that support you, fight for you, and never abandon you. So their journey did not come to an end. It simply became something new. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's place? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching real-life stories.